Hello, and welcome. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Zach.
Where are we?
That's a very good question. We're in the wilderness somewhere. Can anyone guess where we are?
Well, it's green.
It is. Can we give them a clue?
It's in London.
It's in London. Can you imagine? We're in London. We're actually in a very famous park, but in the back sort of corner of it. You would never find it unless you were very clever like us, right?
Absolutely, yeah. How long have we walked to get here?
We've walked quite a way. We're actually in Regents Park. We're literally a hop, skip and a fair walk from the epicentre of London.
It's fantastic. And we are, as you might be able to hear, we're joined by the birds. We're joined by happy people.
We've given them permission
to play. And we're joined probably by many insects as well, which is wonderful to see.
Why we're moving around a little bit furtively at this very moment.
Why we can't sit still. So welcome. We are here from London live, and this is we are the Outsiders, and this is us saying hello, trying something new and different as always, because we're outsiders. We like to be different,
and we're cutting edge.
Trying to be anything that we like to be. So let's continue with our exploration and discuss. First of all, let's sort of to figure out what an outsider is.
I think it's very important, Zach, to figure that out, because a lot of people who've been listening to this probably don't know or haven't figured it out. But I think when you're in a situation in life when you are aware and sensitive to what's going on with you, you're in the perfect position to analyse this. A lot of people aren't. But why don't we start off with, before we give our own definition of outsider, what does the Collins Dictionary state an outsider is?
It does state that an outsider is somebody who doesn't fit in or isn't part of some group, belong to a group or organisation. Belong was the word I couldn't think of.
Yeah.
But that's what an outsider is officially, under official terms, as well as a few other things. But that's the most important one that we wish to focus on for our series of explorations and videos and podcasts. Well, how about for yourself?
Well, for me, the idea is, I think, as I've said in many podcasts before, and I reiterate this really for clarity, is I don't think it's something you choose. It's not something you sort of wake up one morning and go, I am this. I mean, there's been many stories, many films made about being an outsider, and many people, creative people, actually are outsiders. But I think it really starts from the home, from growing up. And therefore, it affects how we engage with life. And on that basis, it's something that happens to us and we adapt to as we evolve and grow. For me personally, it has meant that the way I was, let's say, educated, brought up in my life, was that basically I should be seen, not heard, which I think is a common theme for a lot of people. Therefore, I tended to go off into my own space. And despite the fact that I had a brother, we played from time to time, but I think we both went into our own separate zones. And this was the starting point of us being sort of adapting to life independently. And it's always been the way. It's been the way I suppose been formatively educated, and the way I have been pretty much throughout my life. Hence why we're in a forest. Yes. What about you, Zach?
Well, it's outsiders for me. I've always felt outside of sort of the world in general. For me, it's like sort of isolation. It's being isolated from, as the dictionary suggests, an organisation, or I kind of felt isolated from the world in general. And it's a feeling I've always had of almost being an alien. It's almost as if I've been transported here, and
an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, and the more I've read, it feels a bit like that sometimes. The more I've read about it, it's linked to people with sensitivity, where they do feel that they're disconnected from a lot of the world, because they're not feeling the same things as many people that they see on the street. And that's how I've always felt. I felt sort of slightly alien, detached from many people. Not saying everybody, but from many people, from the sort of masses.
And it affects our behaviour, because it doesn't mean that we don't want or need or enjoy engagement with people, relationships, friendships. Everyone needs some kind of interaction. It's important. However, from my perspective anyway, I'm quite happy to do my own things in my own space. I enjoy my own company, and I enjoy other people's company. However, I think I'm a little more finely tuned as to whether or not those people, that organisation is for me or not. And I can self-select, which means, folks, and I don't know if you can relate to it, I've got the best exit strategies known in man. Even these people behind me agree. Yeah, so it means that I know how to, take myself out of something pretty quickly. It's a skill. It's not something I'm proud of, but it is something you adapt to, you learn as you go through life.
I think that's the thing. It's learning about yourself as you go along, because to do that takes confidence, doesn't it? And it's more confidence in yourself, because for a long time you feel as if you should fit in. We're sort of fed this idea, perhaps through school, perhaps through parenting and expectations, that you've got to fit in, you and you don't want to stand out. I think we're not taught to stand out, are we? Or to be comfortable in our own uniqueness.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, again, what is interesting about this programme, which we've certainly learned as we go along, is that Zach and I possibly come from different perspectives, and yet here we are sitting on a bench, on a branch, or on a birch, in the middle of the woodlands somewhere in central London, discussing this very issue. It means basically that we can all come from different parts of life, society, wherever it is, and circumstances, and find ourselves actually in the same space. And that's kind of what an outsider is, because we're all affected by things differently, and yet we find ourselves in a situation where we either self-impose this isolation or choose not to engage, or find that it just doesn't work for us, or whatever it is. But we are sensitive enough to make that decision, rather than hanging around hoping that we will eventually fit in, or someone will give us permission to fit in.
Yeah, because it does sort of feel a bit, you can feel a bit guilty, or feel a bit, some people feel ashamed because they can't fit in. They think there's something wrong with them. And that's the thing that I want to try and help people with. There's nothing wrong with any one of us, really. We're all our wonderful, unique selves. And we all have this sort of connection to anything that we want to. It's ultimately a connection to yourself, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's where you've got to start.
That's where we start.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about this week? That's what an outsider is.
Introduction that was. Hopefully that's clear enough, and hopefully that resonates with some of you out there.
So we're going to be talking about and discussing and exploring, as we try and do, the idea of risk, isn't it? Should you take a risk? What is a risk? Why should you take a risk? When should you take a risk? There's lots of questions about that. We're not going to answer all of those, are we? Because I've probably thrown up too many now. There we go. I've taken a risk just by being handled this microphone.
That is very true.
That is a risk.
Yeah.
But we've got a couple of stories that we'd like to share with you about risks that we've taken in our lives. And there've been absolutely many of those, and also we're going to try and sort of come up with an outcome. So but at the end of this episode, we hope that you have some fear.
Hopefully not fear.
I'm trying to say fear removed.
Remove the fear.
Remove the fear
of anxiety
for taking a risk.
Okay.
And so to have a bit of confidence towards actually, because as we've said in previous podcasts, it's about doing as much as believing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got to do as well. But we'll start with a couple of stories. Let's start with Mark's story on taking a risk. What was it? There was a story.
There's been many, Zach. I think the one that happened most recently, which really was for me a big step, was that quite recently I started to really engage with music. It's something in my head I'd been doing most of my life. And for the very reason we sort of introduced the idea of being an outsider, I wasn't really encouraged or supported or, given any sort of belief, confidence to do something. So therefore I kind of went into my head. And that's how life sort of played out for a long time. My dreams and my aspirations were locked away, as it were. Later in life, and there's lots of other stories, but later in life, I decided that I should start to pick up the guitar again, and I did this in periods over in my life, but this time I did it with a bit more conviction. And the reason for that was that I'd written a letter to my daughter, because we were separated by space, by time, and I was really starting to miss her, and I wanted to write a letter to her. The craziest thing was that the letter was indeed something that wasn't intended to be. It turned out to be a song. How do I know that? Well, I'd written this letter to my daughter to tell her how much I loved her and missed her, etc. And I was watching or listening to, sort of on and off, one of these TV series that happened to be on while I was writing and thinking and whatever. And it was a TV series called Nashville, which was, kind of light entertainment, but quite enjoyable. And I sort of got into it. And the lead character said, to write a song, you just need 3 chords and a story. And it resonated with me. It was just one of those things that just hit me right between the eyes at the right time. I'd written this letter to Olivia, my daughter, and almost within, hours of that, had gone to a music store, which was very close where I lived, bought a guitar, raced upstairs. This is how impulsive I was. And I started to work on this because I realised that actually my letter was a song.
Yeah.
And that was the answer to both my anxiety, my emotion, and it was putting it on a platform, or in a way, on a vehicle that I really resonated with. And so, a few weeks later, I actually crafted this song. Now, the learning in this was that I had identified what I wanted to do, I had identified how I wanted to do it, and something that just lifted me up, my confidence, my belief, the fact that I could do it, that I enjoyed doing it, that it meant something, just all the boxes organically were ticked. But the challenge and the learning curve before I pass on to Zach was the fact that wasn't the end of it, you see. Because although you can always play for yourself in your own room for your own enjoyment, mine was actually a message, a communication to somebody else. And had I not communicated this message, then it would be internalized again. So I made it my mission to practice it and then perform it for my daughter. Now, to some of you that might sound like not a big deal, but actually believe me when I tell you that performing for somebody that you really care about is far more daunting than going out in front of a huge crowd playing something that doesn't really mean too much to you. And that's what I ended up doing. Now, the outcome of that was that not only was my daughter mesmerised by the fact that I could do this, and it resonated with her, it connected with her, and we both looked at each other and we'd actually made some real tangible connection that I couldn't have done through a letter. So that's my full circle and my learning, and I hope that means or connects with some of you out there. Zach, the floor is yours.
Take it away. Thank you. Yeah, I totally get that. I do understand as well, being when I do a play or any other thing, if I know one of my family is out there watching, it's so much harder when there's people that you know. So because you want their acknowledgement, or you want them to enjoy themselves and get something out of it. So I totally get the pressure that you put yourself under, or the pressure that you felt performing for your daughter. My story of taking a risk is very different, but I suppose it does highlight the different people that we are. I mean, I've made no secret of the fact that I've got depression. I talk about it a lot, and a few years ago, I was on heavy medication. I had to be on heavy medication, and I hated being on medication. I felt ill all of the time. I actually felt worse than I did when I was depressed. I felt like I was a zombie. Yeah. I couldn't laugh as much as I couldn't cry. It was completely. I was like the Terminator, and I took a decision. After a little while of this, I made a decision. I talked to my other half and said, "This is what I'm going to do." I didn't go to my GP, and I know that's naughty. I didn't seek professional advice. I just knew in my heart that I had to come off of this medication. But I knew the risks that were involved in that, because of course by coming off the medication, then I'm taking the risk of going back to where I was, and where I was self-harming and suicidal thoughts. But I took that risk on because I actually wanted to feel happy again. I wanted to feel that joy again. I wanted to laugh at funny movies again, and naturally, exactly. And I knew that by having to have that, by wanting to get that side of the emotion, I had to also accept the other stuff.
Yeah.
And I chose to do that. And 18 months it took for the effects of the medication to wear off before I started to feel human again. But what I got to was a point of balance, and primarily that was because I chose to go down a route of meditation and mindfulness in order just to reconnect with myself. Now that doesn't work for everyone, but it did work for me. Since then I've moved on and learnt other things, and because I've tried CBT and all the other, I've been to psychotherapy and stuff. That doesn't work for me, but this does. And I managed to get to a point of emotional balance. Now that doesn't mean that I don't have depression. That means that there are days when I feel like crap. But I now know what to do, and this is why part of the reason I'm doing this podcast, and part of the reason that connected the two of us, is because I use the arts as a form to help me through those difficult times, and that's where we connected at a network.
That's how we found each other, through the mutual love and interest in creativity and expression. And this is also why we're doing a podcast too, because we know there are people out there who have similar issues and that may relate to creativity and expression, self-expression, wanting to release things that have been locked away for a long time. What we call in the comfort zone, just blocking things off, pushing them off. A lot of people living like this. So we want to really try and connect with those of you out there that, can relate to something like this. So we've got our process, we've got our podcasts that come out weekly. We're called The Outsiders because that's how we see ourselves and that's how we've lived our lives. And our podcast really is all about shaping up to be the best version of ourselves and living within these constraints that we're aware of, which I hope, again, for those of you who are listening or watching this, you can relate to. What we're going to put together, and maybe you'll find it useful, is we're going to do this 5-step little kind of a PDF or some kind of booklet that we see as the leading tips to help you move away from this self-contained isolation in life, the prison, whatever it is you want to call it, and start to become, the true, authentic version of yourselves, being, really in connection or in the flow with who you are. And we're going to make that available to you, but to get this, because obviously there are so many ways and means of getting this podcast, we would like it if you join our community on Facebook. And what's it called, Zach?
It's called Mark and Zach at The Outsiders. Mark and Zach The Outsiders at Hip Not to Be Square.
Yeah, and I wrote that and I never remember it. So we've got a community where you can come along, join us, share your views, ideas, stories, suggestions. We will, over time, invite some of you who wish to come up and either meet us live, or we'll do a broadcast podcast where you can tell us your story. And this is how it will evolve. So I think we're at it.
We're at it, yeah. We are evolving organically. We're trying to be, just to enjoy ourselves and express ourselves with freedom. And I think that's part of it. It's about getting to a point of freedom, isn't it? Emotionally, spiritually.
Well, the world, your world, everyone's world is so much better, isn't it? When you feel at one with yourself, you feel connected. When you're not in that space, you're not the best person in the world to be around.
Nope.
If you are in that space, then you're connected to life again, and that's what we're hoping for you, really.
So that wraps up. I think I've got an insect that's got up my sleeve.
Doing the shimmy.
Oh, I say. So that wraps up this episode, I think. So see you on Facebook, and keep listening.
share your ideas, share your
keep
views.
watching, as they used to say.
Is it?
Something like
Okay.
that. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
We will see you soon.
Take care. See you. Bye.